Huh?
You're recording now.
Yeah, I am.
Like and subscribe!
Thank you, dear. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Impromptu video, why not? Full disclosure, it's been kind of a slow and not great start to the day. So we've got a candle, we've got some peppermint tea, and I'm wearing every space-based bit of accessories I own. So that's how we're getting through today. Today, I want to talk about how to see live theatre when you're on a budget, because online, there's already been some talk about it, but recently it's flared up again. There's been some talk about how expensive particularly cabaret tickets are on the West End. Theatre's pricey, especially West End theatre at the moment is very pricey. There are a lot of shows with ticket prices in the hundreds of pounds, which I know that's quite common on Broadway, but on the West End it's only been the last couple of years you'd get tickets over like £100, and now we're getting tickets that some of the cabaret tickets are over £300. So it's an issue. A lot of people are now like, can't even go and see the shows that we are in. If we weren't in the shows we're in, we wouldn't be able to see them. So I wanted to talk about ways that you can see live theatre cheaply. So if you are down for that, keep on watching. Oh, no, I'm gonna remember a show of the week. Show of the week. You know what? Let's make show of the week cabaret, ironically. Link to the cast recording in the description if you want to check it out. Now let's talk about how to see things cheaply. If you can hear singing, my housemate is singing really loudly, but we're just gonna keep on going. We're just gonna power through is what we're doing. So number one, if you're a theatre kid, you probably know this, but look out for day tickets, lottery tickets, rush tickets, things like that. When, you know, there might be a certain performance or a certain day when they have a select number of cheap tickets, they do a lottery to give away the front row for £10, things like that. If you don't have the TodayTix app on your phone, definitely get it, especially if you're in London and you have the kind of schedule where, you know, you can take advantage of last minute tickets, you know, you don't work evenings or you're a student, etc. It seems that in recent years, kind of day tickets have been replaced with lottery tickets, which is a bit annoying because at least with day tickets, yes, you had to be free at the beginning of the day when the box office opened to like stand in the queue and wait for the day tickets, but you could just, you know, book that day off in your life and be like, I'm getting up at 7, I'm going to the theatre, I'm gonna be there, if you really wanted to see the show. With lottery tickets, you could do all that preparation and then, you know, never win the lottery and get the ticket. For the Mormon lottery, I entered like 3 times because there was literally only one day I could do. If you heard that Josh is painting, I'm just powering through.
Sorry.
It's fine, sweetie. I'm letting go of my inner perfectionist to just film and have fun because I need it right now. So with lottery tickets, it's harder. And also now a lot of shows have online lottery tickets. So like you might apply for the week, I think. I've never done the online lottery, so I'm not quite sure how they work, but it's like you lottery for the week and then you might get, you know, a select ticket for like one show and then you've got to like try and make it work. So it's getting harder to do lotteries in my opinion. Maybe it's easier if you're outside of London, but for people in London, I think it's just easier to just rock up to the theatre and be like, do you have day seats? I just prefer that method. I'm old school. And again, on TodayTix, on the app, they give you notifications of rush tickets. So again, if you're in a position where just last minute you can be like, tickets, buy them, go, then that's always useful. That's kind of the traditional way to get cheaper, particularly West End tickets. Number 2, if you can't get rush tickets or you can't get day tickets or lottery tickets, but you really want to see a West End show, try and go to the theatre if you can. Obviously, if you're outside of London, that's difficult, but if you're seeing a show locally in a regional theatre, or if you're able to come down to London, go to the box office. That way you don't have to pay the sometimes extortionate online transaction fees. You're literally just paying for your ticket, and it won't save you like a ton of money, but it will save you a bit, especially if you're booking like a group of you to go, let's say you and your two best friends, you just want like a night in the theatre, you've all booked the day off, you're gonna be spending the day in London, seeing some sights and then going to see a show. Just book in some extra time to, when you get to London, go to the theatre for the show that you want to go to and buy the tickets there rather than pre-booking them.
Hiya, editing me from Beyond the Grave, apparently. So, obviously, if you want to see a specific show on a specific day and you have no flexibility with that, and you're travelling from outside of London, I would recommend checking availability online first before just rocking up on the day. Because if you check what the ticket situation is like a week or two before the date you want to go, and there's already limited availability, chances are if you rock up on the day, you're not going to be able to get reasonably priced tickets. However, if you either A, live in or close to London and so can go in person to pre-book your tickets ahead of time and see the availability, and or you're not fussed about a specific date, so you know you've got some wiggle room over when you go, so you can see when there are less busy days when you're more likely to be able to rock up on the day, or you are not fussed about seeing a specific show, you just want to go to the theatre, and therefore you can have like a short list of things you're interested in seeing, and you don't mind wandering around to the different theatres to see which one you can get the cheapest tickets at, then rocking up to the theatre could work for you. If you want to see Mamma Mia on the 18th for Mum's birthday, I would suggest like booking that in advance and just eating the ticket booking price. But yeah, that's all from me. I'm gonna go back into my undead realm. This light is so bright, man. I've never looked so white in my life.
Because you're gonna have to pay, like some transaction fees can be as high as like £3 or £5, depending on the company that you're booking through. And if you're on a budget, you don't want to pay that extra coin. So just go straight to the theatre, it's way easier. Number 3, tying in with going to the actual building to buy your tickets, is try and go on less busy days. So think weekday evenings or weekday matinees. Again, if you have to work it around a job, that could be a little bit tricky, but those shows tend to be less busy. Like if you go on a Friday night or a Saturday matinee or a Saturday evening, it's going to be busy and it's less likely that the box office can sort something out for you and be like, well, we can sell you these tickets but move you down, if that makes sense. If you are able to go on, say, a Tuesday, like that's what, when I went to see Once, this was years ago, when I went to see Once, I was living in Southampton at the time, I was at uni, I literally took myself to London for the day because I'd like done my lecture in the morning and I was like, I want to see a show. Took myself to London, walked to the Phoenix Theatre and was like, hey, do you have any tickets? And they were like, we can do you less than 20 quid in like the 4th row from the front because we're dead. Because it's a Tuesday, who goes to the theatre on the Tuesday? So you can, if the box office are willing to be flexible and not like too jobs worthy, you can get good seats for a cheaper price, because there's no point in them being like, well, if you want to pay 30 quid, you have to be right at the back when there's no one there. And even if when you're booking your tickets, they have to do that. Let's say you can't go to the box office actually in the building, you have to book online. If you book on what is traditionally a quieter day and they do have seats available, it could be that they're moving people forward anyway to try and make the building feel fuller, like make the levels feel fuller for the audience. Or, I don't know if I should say this, I don't care, I'm gonna say this. Or you could probably like, if you're sitting, let's say at the back of the Grand and you can see there's loads of seats free in front of you, you can just like sneakily move forward. I probably shouldn't say that because I'm a front of house usher, and when people do that, we're meant to like go and be like, hey, you can't move forward. But I've been working front of house on shows that aren't on at the moment, so please don't fire me, job. But
Michaela, I would like to make the point that saying we never had to sign any sort of NDA legally for that.
there we go, I'm gonna say it. So I've worked on shows where like the show is coming towards the end of its run, like it's been running for a very long time, it's dead, sitting in the Grand, opening number opens, there's literally like 10 people sitting in the Grand, they all move forward to the front, and it's like, I'm not going to run around the Grand telling people to move back to their seats when it's like empty, and no one would ask us to. So, you know, you can't guarantee that, but it's more likely to happen. And even if you can't do it like right at the beginning, you know, at the interval, if you've spotted some empty seats, just like sneak in there. By the time you get to the interval, there's probably not going to be latecomers taking those seats, so you can just be like, hey, we came a bit late, missed the first half, how's it going?
I will just add the caveat that if we as front of house ushers see you move forward to a seat that isn't yours, then we are technically obliged to tell you to move back to your assigned seat that is on your ticket. But if we don't see you move and we don't know you've moved, we can't tell you to move back. And as a front of house usher, in the interval anyway, we're worried about toilet queues and selling programs and all of that kind of interval stuff that we have to do. And when we're sitting in, obviously if you get up in the middle of the show and move in the middle of the show, we're going to see you do that. But like, we're not keeping tabs of who's sitting where. We're looking out for people talking, people on their phones, potential first aid incidents, and making sure that if there's an emergency, we can evacuate you safely. We're not thinking, oh, that blonde man was sitting in T28 and now he's moved to H27. Oh, no. Like, that is not my priority. So, yeah. Can't guarantee you won't be told to move back to your seat, but
Oh, yes, no, actually one more thing. Side note about actually physically going to the box office if you can, is that if you're trying to hedge your bets of like getting a good view but not spending all of your money, if you go to the box office, they'll actually be able to tell you what is a good view, and not just in the, you know, traditional restrictive view where it's like there's a pillar in the way versus not, but they can tell you things about, for example, the rake. So if you're like, I want to sit further back, they can be like, well, if someone tall sits in front of you, the rake is very shallow, so you might not be able to see, versus, you know, you're right at the back of the, I don't know, royal circle, but it's really well raked, so like you're definitely going to be able to see. Going to the box office, you can have that discussion with the person on box office to see like how restricted it's likely to be outside the, you know, there's a literal pillar in your face, so it's technically restricted, versus I'm short, so if I sit here, is it going to be impossible for me to see because like I'm 5 foot and, you know, a 6 foot man might sit in front of me, you know? Number 4, although I think if you're in this position, this is probably your first port of call anyway. If you know people in the industry, you're friends with actors, or you're an actor yourself and you know that people might know people, it's a small world theatre, seeing if there are any company rate tickets. Now, full disclosure, depending on the show, company rate might not actually be your cheapest option. When I was touring with a dresser, for example, there were plenty of venues where it was like, company rate's this, but you can definitely get cheaper tickets just by going to the box office if that's what you need to do. I know there are some, I don't know which show it was. There's at least one West End show when the company rate is like £75, which obviously that is still quite expensive. It's not...
Lehman Trilogy.
Was it Lehman Trilogy?
Yeah.
Apparently Josh says it's Lehman Trilogy. I'm pretty sure Hamilton is 75 as well though.
Probably, actually.
The point being, big prestige expensive ticket shows, the company rate is probably not real world cheap. It's compared to the other tickets available cheap, but if your budget's 50 quid and the cast rate's 75, then that's not going to be good for you, right? So company rate doesn't always equal cheapest option, but if you know people in the industry, it's worth giving people a shout on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or I don't know if people do shout outs for wanting tickets on TikTok, because I'm not on TikTok, because it just doesn't appeal to me. But yeah, that could also be worth a shout, and you never know. So that's pretty much everything you can do if you want to see a West End show. But the West End isn't the be all and end all. There are so many other theatres out there in London and also in the regions. So number 5 is just look at smaller theatres. Don't look at the West End. Not even smaller theatres, even theatres like the Old Vic, the Young Vic, the National, because those houses that are bigger but not West End are partly, if not completely, subsidised by the Arts Council. They're in a better position to sell cheaper tickets. Basically, the West End, it's commercial companies hiring out the theatre, and they need to get all of their overheads back recouped through ticket sales. So if it's an expensive show to put on because you've cast Eddie Redmayne or, you know, whoever your celebrity casting is, or you've got a massive set, or you're a new show, so literally you haven't paid off all of the cost of rehearsal and building the set and storing the set and the getting and hiring everyone and blah, 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 you need to sell expensive tickets because you need to get that money back for your investors and your producers. Whereas if you're at a subsidized house, obviously it depends how much money you've been granted by the Arts Council, but that grant money has probably gone into paying off a lot of those overheads, so you can sell tickets at a lower price. So at the National you can easily get tickets for about 30 quid. Somewhere at the Young Vic you could probably get tickets for about 20-30 quid. Probably cheaper if you wanted to sit further back. Also, those buildings, not so much the Old Vic. I have been to the Old Vic once and I can't remember how much I spent on a ticket there, but the Young Vic definitely, and the National arguably, because they're newer buildings, the sightlines aren't as bad as in older theatres where it wasn't about seeing the play, it was about being like, hey, look at me, I'm fancy and I'm at the theatre. Maybe I should do like a history of theatres on this channel. Let me know if you'd be interested in that.
I think you should.
Thank you, Josh. So not only are the ticket prices on average gonna be lower than with commercial theatre, also buying cheaper tickets doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be able to see it all in some of those venues. Also, some of those venues, not so much the Olivier at the National because that is a big space, but some of those venues do tend to be smaller auditoriums as well. So again, in terms of sightlines, you're just not as big of a risk. And again, if you're going to the theatre anyway, you can always ask and be like, hey, what are the sightlines like? What's going on? Give me the tea on being able to see the show. Thank you for laughing, Josh. Why are you laughing at my jokes? They're so good. I don't even know what number I'm on. I think I'm on number 6. So number 6, if I'm on number 6, if I'm not, I'll just put a number in the corner to say what number we're on. But if you are under 25, oh my God, please. It's too late for me. I was too late for this particular boat. The ship has sailed. But if you are under 25, if you're at the Hampstead, if you're under 30, look up like young people ticket things. So many theatres, particularly subsidised theatres, not the West End. The West End doesn't care about anyone, let alone young people. But subsidised theatres, I don't know if it's something to do with like part of their Arts Council funding thing. They're like, we're going to help young people see the theatre, but they'll have some kind of pass or ticketing thing or thing where basically if you came out of your mother's womb not that long ago, you can get cheaper tickets, all right? Please look them up, because by the time I was like, oh my God, there are like cheap ticket deals, it's like, oh, I've got less than a year to take advantage of this. I know the National does one. I'm pretty sure the Bush does it. Hampstead, like I said, I think theirs is for under 30s. Pretty sure the Royal Court would do it as well. Just look up name of theatre discount tickets under 25 or under 30, find out what they are and just do whatever you need to do, like sign up or request a thing or whatever it is, and do it, because then you can see all of the theatre you need to see before you get old and you just can't afford it because you're poor. So yeah, do all of those things, especially because the reason I missed out on it is because most of my late teens, early to mid 20s, I wasn't living in London, and then when I moved to London to train, like I'd hit my mid 20s and it was like, oh wow, I'm no longer old enough for this. So like if you're not in London going to the theatre a lot, you just don't know about it. So even if you don't live in London and like maybe you go to London to see the theatre once in a blue moon, obviously if you're not in the UK, this probably wouldn't apply to you anyway, but if you still want to like sign up, go ahead. But if you're living in the regions in the UK, you go to London once in a blue moon, I'm telling you now, you can get cheap tickets places if you're under 25. So just sign up for it anyway. If you never use it, you never use it, but at least it's there. So then you don't then move to London in your mid to late 20s and then you're like, oh great, I literally don't have money to see theatre. And if I was like a year younger, I probably could. Do you see what I mean? Number 7, for people who are out of London or have a base out of London, like if you lived out of London and you've moved here, but like your parents are still outside of London or whatever, look at regional theatres. They know that their demographic has to come from the local community and they have to cater to the budgets of the local community. So you're gonna find cheaper tickets, and cheaper tickets does not mean the show is worse. It doesn't mean lower quality when it comes to professional shows. Have a look at what's going on in your local area. See what's on at your local theatre, and not just the touring theatres. Not saying that you shouldn't go to the touring theatres. And with touring theatres that get tours of shows that tend to be appropriate for the West End, either they've come out of the West End to tour or they're going to go into the West End after they tour if there's a venue available. For touring theatres, I would go back to some of the tips that I said for West End theatres, you know, go to the actual theatre to book, try and go on quieter days, etc, etc. But there are also smaller local theatres, and some towns have way more than you would think. Like Brighton has so many theatres and I didn't even know. Have a look, see what's going on. Also, alongside you probably getting cheaper tickets, you're probably more likely to be supporting more local artists who can afford to hire out those smaller, less grand, like #1 touring venues. Smaller touring companies as well that can't do the #1 touring venues, you'll be supporting them. And you'll be supporting, again, part of your local economy, assuming that those theatres pay all of their staff and they don't have volunteer ushers and things. You know, you're paying the wages of people in your local area by supporting those local venues, which is great. And obviously I said in the regions, this is the same in London as well. There are smaller theatres in different boroughs of London outside of the West End. The one that springs to mind because it's one of my nearest is like the Greenwich Theatre in Greenwich. We also have the Space Theatre in East London. There's the Wilton's Music Hall in East London. Stratford East Theatre up in Stratford. And that's just in East London, and I know I've probably missed out loads. I think there's a theatre in Canada Water as well. Like there are loads of theatres, and that's just in one part of London. London is a massive city, so even within London, especially if you live here or you know people who live here, try and look outside of the West End and central London. Try and look at other venues as well and support them in what they're doing. And again, you get some really good stuff. Greenwich Theatre has some cracking shows on, which I wish that I felt comfortable going into an auditorium because I would love to see it. But yeah, they've had some really good touring shows. They had a tour there that then transferred into the West End back when Trafalgar Studios was the Trafalgar Studios with like 2 spaces. And I went to see that show at Trafalgar Studios and it was great. And it had been on at Greenwich Theatre. So it's not a case of, oh, we're seeing like a lower caliber of theatre. You're seeing stuff like at the beginning before it gets the traction to go into the West End sometimes. You get some really great stuff in smaller regional or smaller off West End London venues. And at a good price. Hey. Number 8, I think. Pretty sure this is number 8. Number 8, and this is gonna have some caveats, so bear with me. Number 8 is look at amateur theatre. Now, amateur theatre can be a bit of a minefield because there's some amateur theatre that is really bad. I'm sure we've all seen some amateur theatre that's really bad. However, there is some amateur theatre that is really, really good. Example, the only time I've seen my favourite musical of all time, which I've mentioned so many times on this channel, you probably want to shoot me, Ragtime. The only performance I've ever seen of Ragtime was an amateur performance and I freaking loved it. It was so good. Amateur theatre should not be poo-pooed out of hand. Obviously, if you have one amateur dramatic society in your hometown and you've seen their shows and they're always terrible, you might not want to take advantage of this tip. But if you know that there are some amateur dramatics companies that, you know, are good, or if you don't know, I'd say give it a try. Number 1, because the way amateur dramatics works is that the members of the Amateur Dramatic Society have to pay subs or memberships to the society. Those subs pay the overheads for the show, and that allows the society for performances to keep the ticket costs down. If the Amateur Dramatic Society is good, you know, the performers are strong, they have fairly good, you know, budget or oh, what is the, I literally had the phrase in my head when it's like, oh my god. If the performances are good, if they're like, yeah, we're gonna make this look banging, we're not gonna skimp out unnecessarily on like production value. They have good production value. That's what I was looking for. You know, the performers are good production value as far as subs and stuff would allow. You can have a really great time and see a really good show. Secondly, amateur shows tend to book out regional theatres, so by going to see your local amateur dramatic society do We Will Rock You, you are supporting your local venue to keep it going and hopefully get more professional shows through as well and keep thriving and keep up the culture in your town or city, which we love. Thirdly, you're supporting people in the local area enjoying their hobby and engaging in art and culture and theatre, which obviously if they're completely terrible and you cannot sit through it without a drink in your hand, then, you know, maybe it's not worth the sacrifice. But if you can have like a genuinely pleasant time and be like, hey, great, good on you, you did well, yeah, then that sounded so non-committal. You know what I mean? If you can like go and see some theatre, not have a terrible time, enjoy yourself and be like, well, they enjoyed themselves and I had a laugh, then what's the harm in it? What's the harm? Fourthly, actually, this is another one. Fourthly, what was the fourthly? It just came in my head and it left my head. Where's the fourthly gone? Oh yes, that was it. Fourthly, if you're wanting to get into the theatre profession, you need to see theatre. Any theatre, good, bad, in between, you need to see it because you need to develop your taste, you need to develop a sense of what you're watching, learn what works, what doesn't, and that's what amateur dramatics can be really good for, because amateurs, and this is no shade to amateurs, but like it's just the nature of the thing, like I'm an amateur crocheter, there's probably lots of stuff that I do wrong. Amateur performers and amateur directors and amateur set designers and costume designers make mistakes, right? Or they do things that don't quite work, or they do something that should work but it's not executed in the right way. When you're learning, you need to take all of that in. It's all useful fuel for your creative fire. So yeah, that's also another reason to give amateur theatre a go. But back to the point of this video, it'll also be cheaper. I feel like I've strayed from the point of this video, which is like saving your coin. It can be cheaper. Give it a shot. Like, don't poo-poo it out of hand. Especially if if they've got tickets for like £5, why not? Why not? If you've got the £5 to spare and you can go with a friend, so even if it is a bit naff, you can like laugh about it over some martinis, why not? I don't know why I went for martinis. I think I'm thinking of espresso martinis. Oh man, I really want an espresso martini. Oh, at some point in life, I'm gonna have an espresso martini. Some point over Christmas, we're gonna make it happen. Number 9, I think. Number 9 is look up free stuff. There's so much free stuff that like if you're just not thinking to look for it, and I am so guilty of this, but so much free stuff or like free festivals or whatever, like in the town, particularly in the summer for some reason, I don't know why, that like you can just go to. Example, so apparently in London Bridge there's this free festival that happens in August called The Scoop, or it's at The Scoop, I don't know. It's like outdoor and it's art, music, theatre, dance, all of the things, right? One of my castmates in the dresser had been mentioning it to me whilst we were on tour when we were just like chatting in the dressing room. I think she'd been in a show that had been on at The Scoop and she was like, oh, have you heard of it? And I was like, oh no, not really. Then when I get back from tour, I catch up with a friend from a, you know, regular non-theatre job. We go and have lunch, we catch up, and she mentions the same exact festival, being like, oh yeah, I did some like dance, they had some dance things there and you could like join in salsa, and I did that and it's really fun, you should check it out. I'd never heard of this thing. I'd never heard of it, but it's been going on for years, and it's literally the whole of if I remember rightly, the whole of August is just free arts and cultural events. Completely free. And that's just one thing. Again, London is a big city. You've got other cultural hubs like Manchester, Bristol, Brighton. Even like the festivals that everyone tends to know, I say everyone, most people in theatre, if you've been in theatre for a while, will know about, like the Edinburgh Fringe. Does Reading have a Fringe festival? Or am I just thinking of the music festival? Let's put Reading down. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Brighton Fringe, Latitude, so many different festivals. Yes, there'll be ticketed events. You belled it out, Louise. Her name's not Louise. I was just quoting Gypsy. Sing out, Louise! All of those festivals, yes, they'll have pay for ticketed events, but there's also loads of free stuff going on because people just flock to them and are just like, hey, the Hat Festival not in Whitstable, in Winchester. If you don't know it, basically, if I remember rightly, because again, it's been a long time since I've thought about the Hat Festival in Winchester, but essentially it's this big busking festival. So I think there are a few ticketing events, but loads of artists. I think you have to like reserve a spot so it's not like completely overrun. But like basically it's a street festival, lots of different acts, music, theatre, lots of stuff. They do their thing in the street and people put money in hats. It's like this big busking festival. So obviously you want to tip whoever you're watching, but it's essentially free, right? You could, if you really wanted to be an annoying person, or if you are literally that skint, you could just go and look at what people are doing. Or if you know you have a budget, let's say your budget is £10, go and see 10 free people busking in the street and give them £1 each or whatever, or just tip people until your money runs out and be like, well, I can't tip anymore because my budget was £10. Do you see what I mean? Like, look up free stuff. Secret London is good for stuff going on in London, but it's not just theatre. It's also like, oh, this crazy gin bar made out of rainbows is opening this summer. And it's like, okay, great. Like, I don't need to go to a rainbow gin bar. But they also have other free things happening around the city. Easiest thing to do is probably to just Google insert city free theatre or free arts or free events and just see what's on. And just, I should really do this. This is going to be one of my Uni Year's resolutions, I think. Just periodically just search and see what's going on. A lot of stuff tends to happen in the summer because things can happen outside. So, you know, you've got more space to do random free events. But yeah, just look up what's on that's free and going on. Most towns and cities that are big enough will have something because, you know, someone's got the Arts Council funding for it, and the Arts Council are actually quite big on wanting to improve culture throughout the country, not just in London, because there's lots of stuff going on in London, and other places also need culture. Like, as human beings, as creatures, we need culture, we need art. So yeah, there's gonna be some stuff going on. You just need to look for it. So look for it, guys. Bam. Look for that free shizzle. This video was good for me. I don't know why. Just sharing the love and the joy. I don't know. So those are 9 things that you can do to watch theatre on a budget. Because there's no such, like, there's just nothing like live theatre. And yes, I know I could have added things like find free online, not dupes, what are they called, bootlegs of things, blah, blah, blah. It's not the same. Like, yes, there are loads of shows on Netflix, and yeah, go off. Like, if you've got a Netflix account or access to someone's Netflix account, go and watch stuff on Netflix. But it's just not the same as being in the same room as the people doing the thing. I just think that's magical. But not all of us can drop £300+ on tickets. So yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Would love to have you on the channel. Come on down, we have a great time. Stay tuned for more theatre content from a UK perspective, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye, friends.